We shape our buildings, and thereafter, they shape us. Welcome to FarmED for another edition of the FarmED podcast with me, your host, Alex Dye. And today I am joined by award-winning architect and designer of the FarmED buildings, Tim Tasker. How are you today?
Good to see you.
Wonderful. So, who is Tim Tasker? What's your story? How did you get to be where you are today?
How did I get to be where I'm today? So, I was born in the northeast, rural northeast Yorkshire. Wanted to be a farmer for many years. My parents are both architects, and one's an engineer, structural engineer. So I guess that was fairly ingrained in me.
So why did you want to be a farmer?
All I wanted to do was drive tractors. I still am obsessed with them. I love them, and I like growing things. And then just really was quite heavily involved in the landscape when I was a little boy, from fishing to got my tractor driving license when I was 16, and then I think I wanted to become a car designer for many years, and then I couldn't because I didn't have the maths A level, and then always doing art, always drawing, and then I got into architecture. Which was sort of natural. It's quite a vocational thing, isn't it, really, I guess? Once you do architecture, you're in. And so, and then studied in Oxford Brookes down the road for my degree. Then went to London, to UCL, and then ended up working for a series of practices, starting off in a small classicist office, Russell Taylor Architects, bless him, using an HB pencil, drawing one-to-one Corinthian columns. And then went to work with some bigger guys. Went to work for the Millennium Wheel architects. Worked on some exciting projects there.
So you're telling me that you designed the Millennium Wheel?
No. Although many people would have claimed, no, not at all. That's but worked on some sort of similar sort of engineering-y type projects. Including some bridges and some walkways and a school or two. And then went off to work for Wilkinson Air, where I worked on a number of things, including 4.5 years on Battersea Power Station. Various other Thames cable car crossing, was on the bridge team for many years. And then went out to the Middle East for a little bit with another practice, Jonathan Dunn Architects, and worked out in the Middle East for a while. Didn't enjoy it much. And then came back and then started a little practice in 2016. And quite soon after, came here for the first time. It must have been 2017 or 18, I think, after Ian Celine had just sort of bought the farm. Yeah.
So, you met Ian and Celine. How did you come to be involved with the design of the buildings here at FarmED?
Well, I went to uni with dear old Paul Totterdale. Yeah. So, and then it was Ian and Celine just bought it at auction. I think it was at 2017, and it was amazing. Came here with dear friend of mine, Chris, who was also an architect, who also worked on it in the early days. Assisted as well, sort of further on in the process, by my friend Ant, who's Anthony Carlisle, who's also an architect, who also helped on it as well. And it was an amazing process, you know. It was we didn't know where the farm buildings were going to be, where the entrance was going to be, what even the farm was. This is before the days of when it was called FarmED. And it was an amazing process with Ian and Celine. You know, it was all inside them, so to speak. And it was brilliant working it through with them. And
It sounded like we were discussing this just before. The building that we are now currently in, which for anyone who's been to FarmED, is our cafe, our sort of there's a library space in it as well. But it was originally had a completely different plan for what this building was going to be. Is that right?
Yeah. It was going to be called the Enterprise Barn, and the idea of it was to kind of accommodate small microprocessing businesses. And so it was, it was an agricultural steel frame set up on standardized bays, to coordinate with standard sheet sizes of various materials. And the idea was that the frame could take a mezzanine floor if it needed to be, and that little, microprocessing businesses for honey or beer or whatever it was could kind of accommodate these little spaces. And then it all sort of evolved and became much more focused on food. And then it kind of evolved into a cafe, really. But that was the exciting thing about the process as well, really, was kind of evolving the architecture out of the kind of programmatic requirements of Ian and Celine, and kind of seeing that come into being was, one of the best design processes I think I've ever worked on. There wasn't a big consultant team. It was sort of a pre-consultation process with the council as opposed to straight into it. Was it was an amazing experience.
And so they, from what it sounds like then, did Ian and Celine approach you and say, we want to build this place, do you have any ideas for us? And we want it to be this, this and this. Or did you say, tell you what guys, I've got some ideas? Because it sounds like, from what you're saying, it's a very collaborative process. There was lots of back and forth and things changing and taking shape over the years.
It was. Yeah, it was really collaborative. And there was, many other people involved in the process as well. Back in the early days, Ian's sort of little black book of people was all there, and lots of things influenced it, from where the apiary should be to where the soil changed, and then I remember that the Fibonacci concept was kind of born quite early on in terms of the geometry and what came from that.
So as someone who has no basis in architecture, could I ask you to just, for the layman among us, what is the Fibonacci concept?
So, I mean, sort of golden ratio, which is found in everything.
So like a sort of snail shell sort of shape?
Yes. So there's a sort of triangular shape that comes out of that, and then another square, and so if you look at the farm buildings here, and the courtyard spaces and the spaces around it, they're sort of derived from that geometry, from the kind of master plan of it right down to the smaller details of the building.
And what's the benefit of that?
It's a lovely places to be in. Golden ratio spaces. They feel really good, and you get a nice proportion between the buildings in terms of the spaces and the ratios, and they're quite simple utilitarian buildings, aren't they? Really, and so that was the kind of driver for the setting out and the geometry.
I suppose you had to think quite a bit about not just what the buildings would be inside, but their place within the landscape as well. Because we are in the Thames Valley, the Evenlode Valley here. We have got these rolling hills over. Yeah. Did you think much when you first arrived on the site about how you would make the buildings look and how you would make them play within the environment?
Yeah. I mean, geez, I remember the first time I saw the Evenlode Valley, I was like, shit, this is crazy. It looked like sort of Tuscany or something, coming from South London, when you first saw it. And so there was a deep respect for the landscape. And, it always had to be a contextual building, as it quite often has to be. But it was, and so, it's a sort of modern day farmstead. It's a series of buildings arranged around a courtyard with, one of the buildings preventing the prevailing wind from coming into the courtyard, and creating a space between, the spaces between the buildings become ever more important. So the kind of roofscape and the way the buildings were arranged, there was definitely an early consideration to work with the landscape and work with the local vernacular.
And whilst we were chatting earlier, you brought up this concept of healthy buildings. So could you define for us what is a healthy building?
What is a healthy building? Well, I think we spend 90% of our time in buildings now, and so they have a profound effect on our health. And so there's lots of things that we can do to make internal spaces healthy. And so we obviously have to provide good clean air, 4 air changes an hour, and fresh air, healthy air. We need to think about cross ventilation. We need to think about relative humidity in spaces and how that's controlled. So treating air like a building block almost is really important. And then we need to make sure there's enough light in our spaces, natural light, really, really important. So they say, on the spring equinox, you should have 2 hours of direct sunlight in a space. And, and kind of it's getting much easier now with these fancy tools to kind of calculate this and to assess, what's the maximum daylight we can have without overheating and how we can passively control light. So light's very important. Acoustics very important. Acoustic comfort, very important. And I think, the kind of connection to the outside, connection to nature. We all come from nature. You've got to have a view into some sort of green space. Even if you're dealing with a really dense urban environment, is how do you create a little view into a courtyard, or do you know what I mean? A little sight of a tree off to your left or something. So I think the connection to the outside is very important for a healthy space. And there's other things which are more difficult to quantify, but it's kind of asking this question. Well, what gives a space a spirit? What gives a space its soul? And and that, quite often, when you have some really lovely internal material finishes, for example, that have been handcrafted, and there's some love and some care that's gone into making the components around you. That really gives the building some permanence, gives it some presence, gives it some spirit. And I think that's very healthy as well.
So is it something that you've always included when it comes to designing buildings? Is it something that's right back to the start when you were very first beginning your architectural journey? Did you think healthy buildings, that's the way I want to go? Or is it a bit more of a more recent understanding and development?
I don't think so. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, I've spent years designing really unhealthy buildings in these big practices. I mean, it's just, it's kind of, so basically after the war, pretty much sort of 50s onwards, we'd just been designing these plastic bags for people to live in. And, all these stupid sort of facade systems that are, all derived from petrochemicals. And, kind of aluminium cladding panels, just PIR every time. PR insulation is sort of rigid insulation, and it doesn't sort of breathe. So, breathability of a space has become much more of an important issue to me now, I think. And, you've got to balance cost as well when you're building. We've got a housing crisis, So I'm not saying that, we can't, have to entertain some things. But I think, for a lot of years in big commercial settings, I haven't really been working on as healthy a spaces as I could have been, really.
But what was the turning point then? What was the moment? Do you remember a moment where you thought, that's switched on a light bulb?
Yeah, I guess when I was a kid, going to places like the Centre of Alternative Technology in Wales, seeing straw bale houses, old cob buildings, but then really kind of really light bulb moment was probably more recently, and particularly on the design of this. I think have to say, Celine's sensitivity to sort of non-toxic, low VOC materials in the early days was really opened my eyes to the importance of toxicity in internal materials, which is really important actually. And then kind of really understanding what a breathable building does, because it's quite complex. A lot of these sort of bio-based buildings, that they naturally buffer sort of humidity levels passively, and it's obviously very unhealthy to live in a space that's got too much air moisture in it and not enough clean air. And so I think in the last sort of 5 or so years particularly, it's become more important.
And when Celine said to you, "Oh, I want you to take these sorts of things into consideration when making the buildings, when designing the buildings," did you have to kind of go back to the drawing book almost, completely reevaluate your whole idea of how this all works, or did everything seem to fit quite seamlessly together in this new idea?
Everything it's quite seamless, to be honest. And there was all sorts of things that sort of new products and suppliers that you kind of sort of learn about, and but no, it was pretty it was it's a standard sort of stud work build up in a way, but rather than using PIR insulation, we obviously use sheep's wool in this building.
Very appropriate for a farm centre.
And obviously hemp in the new one. So it's a lot of these changes to construction practices, they're not massive. Do you know what I mean? A hemp block looks the same as a concrete block, but it's carbon positive and not. Do you know what I mean? So it's not.
Well, that brings me nicely on to my next question, which was going to be that I know that you have recently become very, very invested in the world of not only hemp more generally, but within construction. So first of all, what are the benefits of using hemp in construction? Why would someone? And how did you come across it in the first place?
Well, I guess it is sort of bio-based materials, isn't it? And it's the idea of growing something that absorbs carbon. And then you sort of you build with it and use it as a store. It's breathable, can be grown from near where you live, but it's rather than it being a carbon, negative material, it's the opposite. So and it's inherently sustainable. And I think that's what you find generally, is that to create a healthy building generally means you're creating a very sustainable building. And so
And does that differ too much from concrete or more traditional building materials?
What, in terms of the healthy
building for us and for the environment? And you mentioned like this, the CO2 and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, so to stand back a bit, buildings account for 38% of UK emissions. So 38 is massive. And then, if you consider that farming and food and processing, and you throw all that together, I think you get approximately 25%. So these are like big numbers, and we know how to do it. It's not complicated, and so it just seems like a very natural thing to do, to grow, to cultivate building materials in fields and forests, and then process them and then use them to build with.
So for anyone who's listening who's heard us speaking of hemp and is now thinking of, let's say, the cousin of hemp that has a bit of a reputation, why is that? So what's the difference between hemp and cannabis? Well,
so hemp as a crop was banned for many years, and you've only been able to grow it in the UK since 1993. Hemp in construction started around in the 80s in France. They basically had lots of old farm buildings that had been sort of patched up and worked on with non-breathable materials like cement, and they obviously trapped the water inside the build-up and caused the thing to rot. And so it was sort of pioneered over there in the early days. But there's lots of benefits of hemp. I mean, the first thing is that it can lock up carbon, and you can build with it. So you're doing good for the environment. The second thing really is that it's got this amazing ability to breathe, but it also regulates the indoor moisture levels, so that's really useful. But it can also create really stable indoor environments by not allowing the heat to pass through the build-up. And so it builds up in the hempcrete, or the hemp fibre, and then yeah, it's a breathable material that self-regulates indoor environments, locks in carbon. It's got other big benefits, like acoustically, it's brilliant. It's got really good fire resistance.
I noticed you're ticking off a lot of the boxes that you set up earlier for the healthy buildings. So do you think hemp is the answer potentially to
Yeah,
making
I
a
think
healthy
it's
building?
one of a suite of building products. But yeah, I think it's I think it's brilliant. Yeah.
And you said, just in passing whilst you were talking there, about the idea of growing our own buildings. And obviously hemp is only one part of that, because you couldn't, or could you make a whole building out of hemp, just hemp?
Yeah.
Oh, well, okay. Fair enough. Go on.
Well, yeah. So there are some hemp structural blocks, but a lot of the hemp fibre, which is the outside of the plant, and the inside of the plant, which is the shiv, are non-load bearing. So you get the shiv, which is sort of little pieces, looks like cornflakes kind of thing. You mix it with a binder, which is a small amount of white cement, and the rest is lime, naturally occurring material. And then you cast it. So that's hempcrete, and then the fibre, which is the outside of the plant, you can use as insulation. So both of those products conventionally have a timber frame, which is your structural frame, and then you kind of you infill the frame with hemp. So you can use hempcrete in the walls or hemp fibre, and in the roof you can do the same thing pretty much. And so obviously the idea of growing buildings and growing timber locally is hugely important, because I mean, for timber, for example, we import 80% of our timber in the UK, and and half of the sort of energy in the timber is comes from transportation and so on. So we use so much blockwork and concrete blockwork in this country. It's a real top of the menu type of thing. And obviously PIR insulation and concrete are two really big, heavy carbon materials, which can easily be sort of replaced. And when you start to look at the ability we have of growing hemp in this country and the benefits that it can bring to farming as a tool, it's only a very small proportion of the land, maybe 2 or 3% of UK farmland, I think, approximately, that would replace all the blockwork requirements, in the UK.
Wow.
And so, my big kind of aim really is to try and sort of understand how to make possible a kind of network of smaller processing facilities around the country that could supply kind of localised construction, and hopefully make a more affordable construction as well, which is just seems to get more and more expensive, conventional construction techniques.
And do you think there is because you mentioned about about wood and trees as well, and importing timber. Is that something that we would be able to do, say if we decided as a country tomorrow, let's make this happen? Are there particular trees that we can grow and we're very good at growing that would fill this niche?
Yeah, the tree thing is complicated. It's complicated. It obviously takes 20 years, to get and and a lot of the timber grows quite quickly in this country, so it's not great for sort of certain types of timber. But we could definitely grow more, and it could definitely be integrated more appropriately, I'd say. But I mean, processing is the big nut to crack as well with timber, because there's one thing growing a tree, there's another thing, planing it and sawing it into planks and so on.
Which I think is also the issue with hemp as well at the moment, that we can grow it just fine where we have a license, but it's the places being able to process it either for the seeds to use in production, but also the fibre as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely, it is. But I mean, I think France is kind of France and Belgium, I think, seem to be sort of leading the way on it. It is, it's a very small niche business, and it's only just developing really. But but the cost of the processing plants doesn't seem to be huge, and to me it just seems like it's something that kind of government and our industry bodies and so on should be looking at in more detail.
In a very small way, and I think this might date this recording quite nicely. The new SFI rules, Sustainable Farming Incentives, have just come out recently here in the UK. And one thing that they have committed to continuing to supply incentives to farmers for is agroforestry. So it sounds like they obviously it's one thing to say, we think you should grow wildflowers or maize, and that could change year in, year out. But obviously agroforestry, if you're going to grow trees on your farm, that's going to take a long time, like you say. And it's nice to know that they are keeping that, they're keeping their money where their mouths are in that regard.
Yeah. And imagine if they tick the hemp box, we could. This stuff grows so quickly; it can grow in a season, and so it's no, that was really exciting to me. If that was to happen, I think it would be superb.
And you mentioned briefly before the little barn and some of the things that we're doing here on site. So, first of all, what is the little barn, and how have some of the practices, the hemp and other things you've just been talking about, how have they influenced the creation and building of?
Yeah, no. So the little barn, as we call it, I don't know if that's the name it's going to be. I haven't really talked to.
No, I don't know. We've used it now. Sorry.
Yeah, no, sounds good. The little barn. So it's basically a sort of conference room, meeting room, with a little kitchenette and a sort of seating area in it. Quite a small building, kind of 19 meters by 5.5, something like that. And then it has at the back of it is a sort of office as well, an office space, 6 people. And you're kind of submerged in the valley. You're wide open to the Evenlube Valley views. And the building was conceived a few years ago, and part of its conception was looking at hemp in relation to a research project that FarmED have been involved with, and other partners, including NIAB and UK Hempcrete and various universities. And the research project was Centre for High Carbon Cropping.
Capture cropping.
Capture cropping.
Very, very close, though. Nice work.
And hemp's got this ridiculous ability to absorb carbon. It's said that you could build a sort of 4 to 5 bedroom family house approximately out of hemp, which from 2 to 3 acres of ground.
Wow.
And that hemp would grow in 3 to 5 months. But obviously some sort of spruce plantations would absorb the same amount of carbon, but possibly over 20 years. It's got this crazy ability to suck carbon out of the air.
And obviously you had all these ideas floating around when it came to hemp and healthy buildings, when it came to designing this new barn. Was there anything that you did with these buildings that you thought, I'm going to definitely incorporate that in the new building, or I'm definitely not going to incorporate that in the new building? Was there a lesson that you learned along the way that you thought, I want to do something a little bit different this time?
Yeah, so we're working with UK Hempcrete, and Alex Sparrow, and he's an early pioneer, and so we kind of came at this as amateurs, but we've learned a huge amount, and the building uses cast in situ hempcrete internally to sort of buffer the indoor humidity and help acoustically. And
so does that mean it will be visible from the inside?
Yeah,
as well?
Yeah. So we cast that in situ, and then it uses lots of hemp fibre. And so we've been to Margent Farm in Cambridge. We went out to NIAB to meet your friend Lydia out
Dr.
there.
Lydia Smith?
Yeah, legend. So that was great. And so that was a really interesting learning experience. And also whilst the building was coming up out of the ground, there was obviously the 2 research plots that you had here at FarmED, and yeah, so all the hemp that's gone into the building is UK grown, UK sourced. So yeah.
And did you find that going to talk to Niab and Lydia about this sort of hemping construction, did adding the science of it all into this equation really change the way you looked at it as well, or were you already so on board that you were sort of knew what was going on anyway?
Yeah, I mean, it's just been a learning experience through the whole thing, really. I mean, talking to Lydia and so on, it really put everything into perspective in terms of the varieties of options, suite of varieties, and also learnt loads about the kind of legality of the whole thing and sort of where we're at in terms of, I think we allow something like 3% THC in our cropping in this country, whereas sort of other countries allow slightly more, and it seems like it's kind of the early days of trying to integrate this into the system, really.
And that means that for the THC, that percentage means that there's only a certain number of varieties you can grow.
Yeah, sure.
Is that right?
Yes, and I think the obviously the research project was looking primarily, I think, at kind of carbon absorption. So obviously you want a species that's gonna grow tall, and but there's obviously lots of dwarf varieties that are much better if you're producing seed, which I think was another arm of research, was looking at kind of how hemp could be used in food.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we also mentioned a little bit whilst we were chatting earlier about the idea of self-building. So, I mean, I'm assuming it's maybe not as simple as it might sound. What is the concept of self-building, and why is that something that you're interested in?
So cost is a massive issue. It costs so much money to build these days. Crazy. But Hempcrete is quite good in the self-build respect, because it's something that a layman could do when taught properly. And obviously UK Hempcrete run courses telling people how to lay their own walls, so to speak. But you can so from a self-build point of view, the costs start to drop quite dramatically. If you imagine when you build, maybe half of the cost is labour, and I think the kind of promotion of self-build in this country is really important. We've got into a sorry old state where we kind of, it only represents sort of 7% of the market, and 40 to 50% of new builds are now done by the big 10 guys really in the UK. It's not good, and so what would be great is if the kind of the hemp revolution, I don't know if it's called that, but if do you know what I mean? If the self-build thing could be propelled at the same time, it would be brilliant. And there's lots of different ways of self-building. It can be done by the end user, it can be done by a community of people, it can be done by sort of other organisational sort of derivatives. But it's I think no matter what kind of material you're building with, trying to increase that 7% to something more meaningful. I think it might be above 30 in Germany, for example.
And is it as simple as going to say B&Q, other shops are available, and buying some 2x4s and just getting stuck in, or is there? Yeah. Well, it's not, is it? But it isn't. Yeah, I think the process of getting into it is really important and shouldn't be kind of looked at as a, everyone's got YouTube now, haven't they? Some great YouTube self-build videos out there. I'm itching to do a little self-build myself actually in the garden. Oh yeah.
But I think I think everyone, it's good fun as well. I think there should be more self-building. Yeah.
So as we start to sort of wind down, what sort of things we've spoken about a lot about hempcrete and self-building and growing your own homes. But what sort of things would you like to see more of here in the UK when it comes to
architecture in general?
I suppose terrace in this, and I guess you've touched a lot upon the link between where farming comes into it and growing and the architecture. Across the whole spectrum, what sort of things would you like to see more of, and do you think we need more of?
Wow.
That's a big question.
Yeah. So looking at the kind of macro scale, we've got an emergency on our hands. And obviously, we've got to do something quite quickly. Everyone knows, the end of the road, we haven't got much road left. And so dealing with the 38 million homes that we've currently got, in terms of insulating them properly would be a good place to start. And insulating them properly as well with natural materials, ideally. So
is that something that hemp could help out with?
Yeah, as well. Other options are available, but hemp would be a good one. And then yes, I think that's really important. And I think that what else do I think? I think that we've got to start integrating more beauty into our developments. There's way too many sort of cul-de-sacs, wimpy cul-de-sacs, not to pick out one house builder, but I think a bit of individuality is vitally important to create not only sustainable housing but sustainable communities and permanence and sense of pride and place. So that would be a good place to start. And I think what I'm really kind of keen to promote is kind of skilled craftsmanship and artistry, and don't see enough young people getting into that at the moment.
So
those are a few little things.
A little bit of everything.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Sprinkle of stuff.
Jolly good. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been lovely
Alex.
talking to you. It has been a little bit roasting in this room. I do apologise
it's
for
pretty
that. But thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks to Tim. Thank you for checking out the FarmED podcast this week. Do check us out on social media. Drop us a like, drop us a review, drop us some stars if you think we're doing anything particularly well. Let us know, and we'll see you next time on the FarmED podcast.